And so we're really honored to be here, Bhante, to be and part of your wonderful, magical work is just beautiful. So thank you for this. The way I'd like to introduce it is I'm going to ask everybody if you could just sit in a chair and put your hands on your knees. Make sure they're your knees and not somebody else's. And I'm going to ask us all, if you like to close your eyes, if you do not want to close your eyes, just pick a spot in front of you, about 24 inches in front of you, and just focus in on that. So either with your eyes closed or open, but just focusing. And I'm just going to invite you just to take in a nice, pleasing breath, in at your own pace and out at your own pace. Just do that for a couple of breaths, please. Just moving at your own pace of breathing. And now what I would like you to do, as you're doing that pacing of breathing, what I'm going to invite you to do is allow a memory or a thought, an image of somebody extending an act of kindness to you, or you extending an act of kindness to another person. Just let that surface for you now. Somebody extending kindness to you, or you extending kindness to someone else. Just let that surface. And as you're observing that experience of kindness, just take note of who is in that image with you. Who is that experience with? And to take note of what goes on in your body. What are the emotions that surface for you in that exchange and experience of kindness? Just take note of that, please. And as you're observing what that experience is, I'd like you to have this awareness with it, that is there with you forever. It's part of your story, part of your history. Now, if I just ask you to take a nice, pleasing breath in and out, and if your eyes are closed, just open your eyes. If they're open, open them wider. And now, if you just have a 30-second exchange with somebody beside you and say, this is what just happened for me, and I'm going to tie it actually into the whole field of neuroplasticity and neuroscience. If you would just take a quick minute, what did you experience during that? Just have a conversation with somebody beside you, just for a minute. Okay. Now, I'm just going to jump in on that conversation with you and back up again. Could anybody just feel comfortable enough to say, what did you observe for yourself or what you just heard in talking with somebody? Could somebody just call out, just put your hand up, stand up, and just say, this is what I experienced. Anybody at all? Oh, perfect. Go ahead, please.
The memory that I decided to hone in on was a really old one. And what I found was that I thought about it, the memory actually became stronger and stronger, the image became clearer and clearer, and the details became sharper and sharper for me. So it's hard to believe what happened so many years ago. I still remember it and so vividly.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, there's somebody's clapping for her. I think that's your wife over there. No, she's not like that. Good. But somebody else, anybody else noticed anything that you're talking with you that you noticed for yourself when you did it? Before we move on. Okay.
So my memory, oops, that's loud. My memory was actually very, very recent, where I got to thank Marta, the one that just spoke recently, and tell her what her message meant for me, because I feel very aligned with her message. And her face just lit up, and it made me light up. So now I carry that in my heart, and I'm really grateful.
Wonderfully said. Beautiful. Okay. That's my flexible movement for the day. We're going to come back to those two comments in a minute, but in so doing, I'm going to turn it over to Brad right now. Okay, Brad?
Okay. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Can everybody hear him okay?
Okay. So I'm going to present a pathway to help you bring more kindfulness and joy into your life and also into the life of people around you. And you'll notice the word simple up here. Arthur coined an acronym for simple that says setting in motion powerful, liberating events. Spiritual energy is simple. It's the ego that makes things so complicated. So we want to be careful not to equate simple with easy either. It's not always easy, and I'll show you why. How to take a path that brings more joy and happiness into your life. So I'll just move forward. Here is another path, a bigger pathway set out in dynamic balance. And what I want to focus on now is the idea of receptivity. And that being receptive to spiritual energy, to information presented to you in a space of non-judgment. When we're in that space of non-judgment, we're more receptive to energy coming in that can better our lives. We heard about earlier the whisper of spirit. The ego shouts and is very loud. The spirit whispers. So all of the beautiful exercises we've learned today so far is about tuning in to spiritual energy. And the spirit, when it comes through you, it naturally brings joy and happiness. A fundamental assumption of our book, Dynamic Balance, is that inner peace is natural. And external things in the world interfere with that. Think of it as a pocket of air deep within the ocean. What's the nature of that pocket of air do? To rise, expand, and express into the world. It's easy enough to stop that, to put an obstacle in front of its ascent. You can even push it down further. You can compress it. But there's one thing you can't do. You can't change its nature to ascend. It's the same with spiritual energy in you, inner peace within you. It's our job not to find it, but to remove the obstacles we put in the place of it rising and gracing our life. And when that inner peace rises, it brings with it joy, and you naturally become more kind. And when you're more kind, you draw people in. It's an energy that expands and includes. Ponte's an excellent example of that. Look at the people that he brought into the room today. Okay, what gets into the way of that? See on this slide in the receptivity, it's that big white screen behind there. And we have vicarious transformation and vicarious trauma because we all, in some ways, are traumatized by the things that are happening in the world. It's not so easy to go up onto a mountain and tune everything out. Right? So we're always being bombarded by a lot of negative energy and a lot of things that are happening in the world. Let's see if you know this word. Anybody ever heard of the word trigger? Anybody ever been triggered? Yeah, me too. What happens when we're triggered? It can lead to a reaction. And when we react, we tend to move forward in harmful ways. energy within us. It needs a way of expressing, and it will express. So when something happens in the external world that activates our emotions, it can carry all kinds of other emotions that haven't been processed and expressed, often even from childhood. So that person that cut you off on the road or looked at you sideways or said something you didn't like can now build a pathway for all those other emotions to come through. And we can overreact, or we can look at it as we can reenact old traumas. Kind of what karma means, doesn't it? So when we're on this pathway, we're on automatic. Now, our emotional well-being, our happiness, our joy, our inner peace is now contingent on what's happening outside of us. And that can lead us to a state of koinonatsky. And that's a Hopi word that means life out of balance, life in turmoil, life in chaos. And the Hopi are an indigenous group of people in southwestern U.S. Think about that word. Just go on any social media site and you can see that people are on this stream. In psychology, they call that an external locus of control. My life is controlled by something outside of me. And that doesn't feel very good. That means I've lost all my power. And what that can do is confine our spirit. And this is a painting by Randall Charbonneau, who is now in the spirit world, an indigenous painter. And that's confined spirit. Now our spirit can't help us. That whisper, we don't hear that whisper because of the noise in the external world, the interference. So what's the answer to that? We need to transform that trigger into an insight. An insight tells us that this emotion is within me. If I want to feel better in the world, if I want more joy and happiness in the world, if I want more peace in my life, I'm the one that has to deal with this emotion instead of working the external world to become peaceful before I can find my inner peace. What are the chances of that happening within the next 50 years? So when I have the insight that this is my emotion, I can respond. We heard of the word respond earlier, very eloquently stated that I like to use the word as a martial artist. I like to use the word response-able, because responsible has a negative connotation for a lot of people. From childhood, you just weren't being responsible. Be more responsible, as if you're not doing something right. But when we can start to take care of our own emotional state, saying this is my emotion, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to keep reacting because that's not making me feel very good most of the time. So if you look at the word respond, and you look at the word in there, respond, S-P-O-N-D, that's an old Latin word that means to pledge or to promise. So to respond means to pledge or re-promise a new way of conducting myself when something's activating my emotion. How do we do that? Arthur coined another acronym, PAUSE, which stands for Providing Attention Unveils Sacred Experiences. So now there's an activating event inside of me. I breathe. I know that I'm likely to could do something or say something that might be harmful. So I'm creating that space. I'm consciously creating a space. I'm breathing. I'm doing my mindfulness practices. And in that space, we have a choice. How do I want this situation to go? And in that space, you can ask yourself a really good thing that Arthur also says. How can I make this well? I'm activated, they're activated. How can I make this well? I can be more mindful. I can understand that everybody on the planet is going through something difficult. And their reaction to me has nothing to do with me. It has to do what's going on within inside of them. So if I'm taking that space, offering more space, that's to be kind in that left lane. How easy it to be kind and angry at the same time. Not that likely, right? So I need to create some space. And going back to, well, those emotions need to move. I want to do things that process old emotions, places like the Cave House, for people that have been harmed by child sexual abuse. It's amazing the transformation that happens there. Ponte talks about, after he does his meditation, sometimes people are crying. It's a beautiful thing because those are the old emotions coming up and finding a way to process and express. Energy needs to move. So through tears, it's a beautiful way to make them move. So your mindfulness activities are so powerful in becoming more kind. And when you're more kind, we saw the science, all the presenters today talking about what kindfulness can do for you. So it can both be an expression of your joy and your happiness, and it can also be an operant to help you make you feel better. So we should be doing kindness, whether we're in that left lane, finding space to do it, or when we're happy, because it works in both ways, always, all the time. Then we become, in this lane, become autotelic, which is a word that means we're intrinsically driven with meaning, purpose, and passion. The things that we do are an end in themselves. I find mindfulness in what I'm doing. I'm writing a book, but I love the writing part. I love the thinking about it part. How we can become, as a practice, more autotelic. Pick something in your daily life that you don't really like very much. For me, it's washing dishes. It's part of mine. It's part of my plate on the world. You know what? Because I do them, and guess what? A few hours are there again. And then again. And it's like, oh my God, this is never going to end. But in mine, I want to become more autotelic. So now I choose my dishwashing experience as a mindful activity. And I can go up to the big politician and say, how grateful I am to have this food, to have hot water and soap to wash the dishes. How lucky am I? Not everybody has that. Now I'm adding gratitude to things that I don't like. And when things get difficult on the outside, I've made a practice of doing a daily activity, right, of mindfulness to it. It helps me build more space in the things that activate me or trigger me. We don't really like that word trigger. We like the word insight better. And when I do that, I'm living more automatically. This is what we mean by dynamic balance. Find our inner peace, inner equilibrium, happiness and joy, even when the world doesn't present that way, even when the world is aggravating us. That I'm taking the power back. I'm not allowing my power, my feelings, my life to be determined by what happens outside of me. Simple, but not easy. I know it's a difficult path, but again, you want to pick very simple things. One other simple thing you can do is in a conversation with somebody, count to 1 or 2 or 3 before you respond. At the gatehouse, we say there's a big difference between listening and waiting to speak. Right? And when we do that, that's another daily activity we can do. And you wait and see how your relationships thrive. Because you're present, you're connected, you're allowing them to say more if you want, and they really feel like you heard them if that little pause, 2 seconds. Try it out for a little bit. That's the practice. So when things get really tough on the outside, you've made a daily practice that you're breathing, you're naturally breathing first instead of tightening up. And that we turn into an internal locus of control, and that frees our spirit. Now our spirit can help us along daily path, and our spirit will
just leaving the paintings up there for a minute, that just look at those paintings for a minute, 30 seconds even. And can somebody just call out a word that you feel or experience when you look at those two paintings? Anybody at all, just say something about what you see there. Freedom. Beautiful, beautiful. Randy spent 19 and a half years in prison. He was considered one of Canada's most violent offenders. He spent 7 years in segregation, total, cumulative. When he came out of prison, when we first met, the second day he came out of prison, he actually went over to a tree and hugged it. He hugged a tree, and I said, "What's wrong with me?" He had hugged me too. And he created, it's in our book that we have here if you want to have a copy. His artwork is an expression of everything that Brad has just said to us. Everything. He was walking in the external locus of control, as an example, and he moved into this pathway, into a realm of insight. And he was doing that because you folks are here, doing what you're doing. You're the folks who create a space for people who had some really horrible things happen in their lives, and maybe have done some terrible things in their lives. But you're here to generate something called kindfulness. That's a heck of a gift to be giving to people. Absolutely. So on behalf of Brad and I want to thank you for that. Can we go to is there one more slide after? There's another painting by Randy. I'd like to end off with my partner, Brad, up here by saying two things. One is, can we all turn and look at the back and thank the technicians for doing what they're doing here today? They've been amazing. And I know when I'm doing presentations, I rarely stand in one spot, so I apologize if I'm climbing all around. The second thing I want to say is, Brad up here is talking. You can hear it. Everybody hear him? 8 years ago, he was in a hospital, and the people in the hospital were telling Brad, "You're going to have to get used to not speaking." He lost it. They've removed his throat. They took his entire larynx out and replaced it with another part of the body. And here he is talking to you. And absolutely. And if I could it's such an honor to be up here with Brad and sharing with you today. I heard somebody say a few years ago, we're just too quick to give people standing ovations in Canada. Maybe we're too friendly or something. But just for one moment, could we just stand up for just one moment? And if we could give Brad a standing ovation, because he's really And so thank you for being here, Bonte. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for being on the planet to all of you. And if you want to see about the book that we have, it's just out here out there, out those doors. Thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon.